Chloe had consistently exuded an enchanting presence that attracted attention, yet tonight was distinct. The atmosphere was charged with a nuanced energy, suggesting a transformation not only in others' perceptions of her, but also in her self-perception and potentially her marriage. The evening commenced with an aura of effortless refinement as she and William entered the hosted party. The room resonated with laughter, prompted by one of his college pals. A discussion regarding the fragrance of premium whiskey intermingling with the aroma of luxurious perfume, fostering an ambience of leisurely enjoyment. William presented Chloe to his acquaintances, his arm possessively encircling her waist, his tone warm yet tinged with subtle possessiveness. However, Chloe perceived the lingering gazes of his friends, their eyes reflecting a predatory hunger that sent a shiver down her spine. It was not the first instance of attracting such attention, but tonight carried an unsettling edge. An elemental undertone that echoed a concealed yearning within. William, with an air of nonchalance that concealed the underlying tension, made a statement that altered the entire atmosphere of the room. Chloe had the ability to captivate everybody present. His voice was buoyant yet imbued with a subtle nuance, conveying a tacit knowledge. An unarticulated challenge among his companions, a dare that lingered oppressively as the evening unfolded and the whiskey permeated the ambience. Grew infused with perilous energy, games that were once innocent and amusing adopted a provocative tone in the conversation. Infused with a double understanding regarding Tandra that accelerated Chloe's heartbeat, prompting her self-discovery. Their focus was on her, and their eyes followed her every movement in the room, pulsating with anticipation. It commenced with a straightforward challenge. Chloe's heart raced at the whimsical proposition that she kiss someone other than her husband, the atmosphere heavy with unspoken longings. However, upon gazing at William, she perceived not disapproval, but a challenge, a tacit consent that invigorated her. The kiss was exhilarating, a clandestine excitement that coursed through her as their lips connected. A renewed flood of exhilaration surged within her, igniting a perilous curiosity. Within her during that singular, electrifying instant, Chloe experienced an inward transformation. A transgression that both troubled and attracted her. The kiss initiated a plunge into the forbidden zone, the stares became bolder, the drinks proliferated. Accelerating, Chloe sensed her inhibitions start to disintegrate. The exhilarating sensation surged through her veins, propelled by the attention and the illicit nature of the game, with each dare escalating in intensity. Propelling her farther into uncharted territory is a domain of sensuality and transgression she had never ventured to explore. William's gaze tracked her. With each movement, his stare was intense, a blend of possessiveness, jealousy, and an enigmatic, deeper sentiment she could not quite comprehend. His calm observation seemed to invigorate her audacity, compelling her to transgress limits more under William's vigilant scrutiny. Chloe permitted herself to become further immersed in the game. Every increasingly audacious, each deed imbued with an illicit closeness. The atmosphere in the room was charged with tension, the air laden with unexpressed yearning. The men, entranced by her every movement, observed with rapt attention as their remarks elucidated Boulder's objectives. One of William's acquaintances challenged her to perch on his lap. Chloe vacillated, experiencing the burden of William's stare upon her, if momentarily. Subsequently, with a resolute elevation of her chin, she acquiesced, positioning herself upon the man's lap. Keenly cognizant of the wave of enthusiasm that permeated the crowd. His hands were positioned firmly on her hips, eliciting a shudder along her spine. A blend of trepidation and exhilaration accompanied her every action as the men's stares intensified, their remarks becoming increasingly indicative of their intentions and more explicit. Chloe's pulse accelerated as she recognized the implicit accord that permeated the atmosphere. A boundary had been transgressed. A boundary was violated, and the exhilaration of defiance was intoxicating. Inspired by the electrifying ambience, Chloe's acts became increasingly audacious. As her inhibitions dissipated with each encounter, Dare basked in the attention and authority she wielded over the men. She aroused forbidden passions within them, she was the nucleus of their universe, the embodiment of their collective longing, and the exhilaration of it was intoxicating throughout. William remained a mute spectator, his attention concentrated on her countenance. Incomprehensible, yet a subtle trace of dark delight lingered at the corners of his lips, suggesting he got pleasure from her presence. Chloe succumbed to their manipulation, captivated by the intensity of his stare and the unarticulated tension that enveloped them. They encouraged her audacity, propelling her deeper into this illicit domain. She balanced precariously between the thrill of the experience and the trepidation of its repercussions, yet the temptation of the forbidden proved irresistible. As the evening progressed, she fully yielded, embracing the power and peril of her defiance, delving further into the shadows of desire. This was no mere game, it was a plunge into a realm of illicit cravings, a perilous dance on the brink of no return. As the atmosphere thickened with tension and tangible electricity crackled in the air, Chloe realized that whatever transpired next would irrevocably reshape her existence. It was not long after she took that initial fateful step, kissing another man under William's vigilant gaze, that the night spiraled further into chaos. William's friends, emboldened by her acquiescence, proposed a new game that surpassed simple words and frivolous challenges, a game that required a deeper, bolder submission. Their eyes shone with a predatory yearning, a longing that Chloe sensed profoundly, a blend of trepidation and exhilaration that caused her heart to race against her ribs. The initial challenge seems deceptively straightforward. Unfasten your blouse, an insignificant action. However, the manner in which they saw her exposed form rendered it akin to suffocation. Chloe hesitated somewhat with her fingertips. Quaking as they lingered over the buttons, the silence in the room intensified the frantic pulsation of her heart. William remained in the corner, his countenance inscrutable, yet the darkness in his eyes was evident. He would not intervene nor utter a word, prompting Chloe to acquiesce, unfastening one button at a time. She revealed herself to their eager stares, sensing the intensity of their scrutiny as her skin was unveiled. It was a torturous, gradual process, each button undone representing a progression. As the final button was undone and her blouse parted, she sensed the collective gasp, the room pausing in anticipation, yet the proceedings were far from over. Their focus was entirely on Chloe, with the dares intensifying, becoming increasingly explicit and insistent. One of William's friends, characterized by a confident smirk and steady look, challenged her to kiss him. It was a challenge she had previously encountered, yet this time the stakes were elevated. The implications were more substantial. It was not merely a kiss. It was a proclamation, a pronouncement from her. Chloe's readiness to yield to her impulses was palpable as the kiss lingered, the undeniable electricity between them igniting a rush of exhilaration. She reveled in the thrill of transgressing the norms and rejecting the limits she had previously held sacred, while the other men observed. Their stares pierced her, drawn to the illicit spectacle, as the tangible tension in the atmosphere intensified, and suddenly, like a dam bursting, the challenges emerged. Rapid and intense, each one propelling Chloe forward. Farther into a domain she scarcely knew, engaging in actions she had never envisioned. Her performance, hitherto confined to her most extravagant thoughts, materialized into reality. The males, encouraged by her acquiescence, commenced alternating their exploration of her body in a manner that had Chloe breathless. A thrilling blend of terror and exhilaration surged through her veins, an intoxicating mixture of humiliation and excitement that she could not dispel. What troubled her most was the horror that gripped her heart, surpassing mere desire, William's silence and his tacit endorsement of the intensifying circumstances. He was perpetually present. Concealed in the shadows, he observed her intently while his companions acted indiscreetly with his wife, yet he remained mute, his demeanor inscrutable, a somber and menacing figure that intensified Chloe's unease. It was his. His stoic acceptance of silence unraveled her more than any of the increasingly intimate dares. The game intensified, with the men pushing limits and intensifying their demands. Until Chloe was compelled to abandon all semblance of modesty and expose herself entirely to their ravenous gaze, every fiber of her body protested vehemently, imploring her to resist. To restore her dignity, yet a force more powerful than rationale, a compelling blend of terror and illicit desire, drove her on. She advanced with trembling hands, acquiescing, her body exposed and defenseless. Under their combined scrutiny, a surge of humiliation enveloped her, nevertheless, underlying it, a thrilling adrenaline coursed through her veins, evoking both terror and excitement. Chloe sensed their gaze upon her, every curve and contour of her revealed form. Their stares consumed her, objectifying her as an embodiment of their shared desire. She had transformed into a trophy in a perverse game, akin to a pawn. In a power maneuver planned by her husband, William's friends sequentially tested the limits. Subsequent touches became increasingly intimate and possessive, but William remained a mute observer throughout. With an unrelenting gaze and a wicked enjoyment evident in his eyes, Chloe's head spun. Endeavoring to understand his intentions, silence, and her shame. Why was he not intervening? Why was he not extricating her from this ordeal? What commenced as a whimsical pastime then transformed into a moment of clarity that pierced through the fog of intoxication and desire. It became evident to her that William was deriving pleasure from her suffering. He was relishing the opportunity to see her acquiescence under the humiliation inflicted by his buddies. This was his desire, his necessity to witness her in this state. Deprived of her dignity and diminished to a mere object of their collective desire, the realization fractured a delicate trust within her. The cornerstone of their connection had shifted. It was no longer a mere game. It was a descent into a profound abyss. A harrowing descent into a realm of distorted wants and power relations. The night was far from concluded, and Chloe recognized this with unsettling certainty. Whatever is ahead will irrevocably change the trajectory of her life. There exists a limit, a barrier to one's extent. Reached a juncture when the mind, if not the body, was unwilling to proceed further. Nevertheless, Chloe had transcended that limit. In the past, her resolve was deteriorating due to the night's offenses. The games and dares had transformed into a malevolent examination of dominance and subservience, transcending just light-hearted exploration, and the ordeal was not yet concluded. A profound stillness enveloped the room. Heavy with suspense and a tangible sense of foreboding, one of William's pals, known for his penchant for challenging limits, proposed a dare that reverberated across the gathering. He challenged Chloe to orally engage with him, the words suspended in the atmosphere. Exuding filth and a visceral primitive desire, time appeared to suspend as all attention focused on Chloe. Intense gazes fixated upon her, anticipating her response. Chloe exhibited hesitation. The gravity of the dare loomed significantly, representing a profound transgression and a more personal capitulation than any other instance as her gaze shifted towards William. She looked for a sign of disapproval, a hint of protectiveness to pull her back, but all she got was a silent nod, a subtle endorsement that sealed her fate. William, her spouse, the guy who vowed to cherish and protect her, was granting her permission to degrade herself. A rush of nausea engulfed her. However, it was swiftly supplanted by an unusual amalgamation of shame and illicit exhilaration. With trembling hands, Chloe kneeled before the guy, her pulse pounding a furious pace against her ribs. She sensed their scrutiny, the intensity of their combined stare searing her skin. The room was silent. An unresponsive audience to this act of degradation, a display that is both sacred and profane. As she executed the action, the ambience transformed once more. The light-hearted repartee that had before permeated the space was supplanted by an instinctual tension. A perilous undercurrent, charged with unexpressed wants, enveloped the men as they observed. Their eyes brimmed with passion and a possessive need, relishing the dominance they exerted over her. One by one, each guy seized his treasure. Chloe transformed into a conduit for their shared aspirations, her consciousness dissociated from her corporeal form. She hovered above the situation, an impartial witness to her own decline. There was no capacity for contemplation, no opportunity for defiance, simply the instinctual act itself and the responses it provoked from the men who observed. She attempted to maintain a sense of control and dignity, but with each man, another layer of her resistance vanished. As she crumpled, Chloe sensed her identity disintegrating, vanishing into the abyss. With each passing moment of submission, she became increasingly detached from the woman she once was, the wife of an individual. In her place emerged a creature of their creation, a vessel for their desires, a plaything to be used and discarded. This realization sent a shiver down her spine, a perverse thrill intertwined with a chilling fear. The men's voices grew louder, their words crude and objectifying, stripping away any remaining vestiges of her humanity. However, Chloe had already lost herself in the intoxicating vortex of submission, unable to protest or care. She had become an object, a plaything for their amusement, and the knowledge of this fact, though degrading, ignited a spark of forbidden excitement within her. Her emotions were a maelstrom, a chaotic blend of pleasure and shame, desire and disgust. She struggled to reconcile the conflicting sensations, the arousal mingling with humiliation, the thrill dancing alongside degradation. How could she obtain enjoyment from this? Despite experiencing dehumanization, she did so, and the humiliation of that knowledge only grew. As the experience propelled her farther into this forbidden zone, William lingered in the background. As a passive watcher of his wife's decline into degradation, his demeanor remained inscrutable, a facade that masked the tumult of emotions surging within him. However, Chloe could perceive the darkness in his eyes, a perverse joy that sent a chill through her. This was his possession. He desired all along what he had engineered through his silence and subtle encouragement. His erection was evident, intensifying Chloe's shame and sense of betrayal. Her pulse raced in her chest. Upon recognizing that she had surpassed a threshold, a definitive point of no return, the burden of that awareness was overwhelming. Yet there was a perverse thrill mixed with the shame, a forbidden excitement that she couldn't deny. She had entered a world she never knew existed, a realm of submission and degradation that both terrified and exhilarated her. The darkness within her, the part she had always kept hidden, was now revealed, and she found herself both repulsed and strangely aroused by her own powerlessness. The night stretched on an endless cycle of submission and humiliation. William's friends took turns, each one pushing Chloe further, her body responding despite the turmoil in her mind and the shame that gnaws at her soul. She was no longer in control, no longer the woman she had been just an hour before, the Chloe who had entered that party, gone, replaced by a creature of their creation, a vessel for their desires. As the night wore on and Chloe sank deeper into the abyss, she felt a strange detachment from her own body, as if she were watching the scene unfold from a distance. The shame and the pleasure, the fear and the excitement swirled within her, a chaotic mix of emotions that defied logic and reason. The realization struck me abruptly, bringing to light the irreversible breach of boundaries. Having crossed the Rubicon of our relationship, we could not escape the alluring pull of our illicit impulses, nor could we revert from the course we had chosen. Chloe entered the restroom, the door clicking shut behind her, signifying the finality of her change. The harsh fluorescent light revealed her reflection in the mirror, a deformed visage that scarcely resembled the woman she had recognized. This was not the confident, self-assured Chloe who had entered the party. This was a stranger, a specter of her former self, her eyes wide with an eerie amalgamation. In a state of shock and encroaching darkness, she scrutinized her reflection for answers and a trace of her former self, yet discovered only the stark evidence of her decline. The phantom touch of their hands persisted on her skin, a haunting reminder of their violation. Their insatiable gazes seared into her memory, ridiculing her submission, and William, her husband, the individual who had pledged to safeguard and nurture her, had remained a quiet collaborator to her humiliation, his implicit approbation and voyeurism contributing to the degradation she had voluntarily accepted. She poured cold water on herself. She confronted a futile endeavor to purify herself from the residual contact of those men, striving to eradicate the shame that enveloped her like a fog. The water combined with her tears, following a course down her cheeks, a tangible representation of the inner conflict that surged within her and the tears that flowed. Chloe's tears reflected the irreversible change she had experienced. She could not evade the consequences of her decisions, nor could she reverse the occurrences that had brought her to this critical juncture. As she re-entered the room, the atmosphere had heightened, the air dense with a predatory desire that threatened to engulf their gazes. Once concealed by a facade of civilization, it now penetrated her with a visceral, primordial intensity. They had experienced her subjection, and they desired further quantities. William, her spouse, remained a mute observer, his eyes black with approval and his arousal a conspicuous manifestation of his perverse wants. He took pleasure in her belittlement of his quiet, a silent affirmation of their moral decay. The males, encouraged by her capitulation, promptly extended the limits further. The delicate facade of social etiquette had broken, revealing a fundamental desire beneath. They insisted on more demands, their voices tinged with a sense of possessive entitlement, and Chloe's thoughts dulled, her body reduced to a mere conduit for their needs. She discovered herself adhering to every directive. Each humiliating deed constituted a further descent into the abyss. She was ensnared in a vortex of humiliation and illicit pleasure, a marionette manipulated by their unquenchable cravings, her autonomy disintegrating into the heady fog of surrender and subsequent rivalry. William's pals initiated a distorted competition driven by a sick desire to dominate and possess Six for her attention, their sinister game intensifying with each moment. In their perception, Chloe had ceased to be an individual, she had become a prize, a trophy to be acquired. Her humiliation elicited a twisted enjoyment. The humiliation was awful, yet her body deceived her, reacting to their contact with a forbidden pleasure that both repulsed and exhilarated her. She was ensnared in a relentless loop of degradation and want, unable to liberate herself from the alluring allure of their depravity, his voice oozing with temptation. With predatory intent, there was a suggestion to push the situation to a new level of transgression. Chloe's breath caught in her throat, an overwhelming sense of fear enveloping her. She desired to shout and go to escape. Eluded the grasp of their perverse yearnings, yet her body remained unresponsive, her words ensnared within her throat. They guided her to the bedroom, a dimly lit, private area that represented complete capitulation and the utmost relinquishment of authority. The bed appeared before her, a formidable altar for her impending sacrifice, a poignant reminder of all she had lost and all she was about to forfeit as they led her toward it. An unsettling dread enveloped her, a sensation of imminent catastrophe that constricted its frigid hold around her heart. Chloe sensed their gaze penetrating her, eroding the remnants of her dignity. Her resistance deteriorated beneath the burden of their unified scrutiny as they alternated in their advances, each guy exerting pressure upon her. As she tested her boundaries and dismantled the barriers she had erected, she struggled to preserve her composure, yet, with each act of submission, she sensed herself losing control. Becoming engulfed in the void. Her mind swirled with uncertainty and agony, her body subservient to their desires. She danced to their melody at her own discretion, a faraway echo, while William observed throughout. His presence loomed from the doorway. Shadow's arousal serves as a harsh reminder of his complicity in the degradation he indulged in with her. Humiliation rendered him silent, a deafening testament to his perverse desires. Chloe had become unrecognizable, utterly lost. Reduced to a bare shell of the woman who once commanded her spirit. Overwhelmed by the burden of their shared transgression, as the night progressed, the harsh truth enveloped her: there was no evading this decline, no retreating from the course she had been compelled to follow. The spiral of degradation had engulfed her, rendering her a captive of her husband's treachery and the unquenchable appetites of his associates, with William, the architect of her ruin, positioned alongside a mute warden, supervising her downfall, his eyes shimmering with a grim satisfaction as she was engulfed by the darkness. The night had culminated in this predictable conclusion that Chloe should have anticipated the moment she entered that den of vipers. Nonetheless, it seems that foresight was a luxury she lacked and forfeited concurrently with her. The atmosphere in the room was charged with palpable tension as William's buddies exchanged knowing glances. This was the concluding act, the apex of their wickedness, the time when all pretense would be discarded and Chloe's total submission would be their ultimate reward. They expended little time on these predators. Their hands were avaricious, their eyes ablaze. Chloe's body, inundated by an overpowering surge of sensations, capitulated to their unrestrained cravings for a brief period. She contemplated whether this constituted a total loss of self, reducing her to a mere receptacle for the satisfaction of others. Her thoughts were a haze, disjointed and chaotic as they alternated, their bodies crushing against hers as their hands traversed every inch of her bare skin. Her body reacted automatically. Chloe experienced an overwhelming internal turmoil, reaching the pinnacle of degradation. She recognized with chilling clarity that she had forfeited all control, becoming a puppet manipulated by insatiable desires. Her own will faded into a distant echo amidst the cacophony of lust. There was no possibility of returning to her former self. As the night progressed, their actions intensified, and their demands became more insistent, pushing her deeper into submission and erasing the remnants of her identity. Chloe's emotions fluctuated violently, a disturbing blend of pleasure and despair, creating a dizzying interplay between arousal and degradation. With each moment, her sense of self diminished, leaving only a hollow shell, devoid of its former essence. Amidst the chaos, William emerged from the shadows, his presence looming over Chloe. Akin to a predator, converging on its quarry. He joined the group, his presence simultaneously familiar and entirely alien in this environment, and Chloe experienced a twisted feeling of relief. At least she was no longer solitary. In her degradation, the awareness of her husband's active role in her humiliation exacerbated the sorrow that threatened to engulf her. The man who had pledged to love and safeguard her had become a collaborator in her demise. The irony is a harsh twist of fate. Ultimately, as the night progressed, the frenzied energy transitioned into tiredness, supplanting the voracious desire that had driven their debauchery. Chloe reclined on the bed, her body marked by their transgression, her mind a fractured expanse under the burden of her subjugation. The recognition of her transformation enveloped her like a stifling shroud, and the room descended into silence. The echoes of their laughing and vulgar comments. As the Williams friends left individually, their expressions revealed their concealed ambitions. William approached her, his eyes shining with dark glee as he examined the destruction he had caused. Chloe absorbed his gaze, her heart burdened by the realization that this night had irreparably changed the trajectory. Throughout their existence, her surrender was total, her spirit was shattered, and there was no evading the darkness they had both accepted. His smile was slow and deliberate, a cruel mockery of the love they had previously had. He had triumphed, and Chloe understood that their relationship would never be the same. She had become entirely a possession, to be utilized and discarded at his will. The understanding enveloped her, extinguishing any last remnants of her prior identity. This constituted her new reality. A reality shaped by the events of that night, from which there was no escape.